Imagine a harbor at dawn, the water alive with vapor and orange light, and a lone sun rising like a promise painted with scrubs of color rather than careful lines. That hazy little canvas, Impression Sunrise, was mocked in its day, and yet the sneer became a name: Impressionism. Claude Monet, the man who turned fleeting light into a language, made the ordinary look miraculous. Today we will follow him from a coastal boyhood to the water gardens of Giverny, tracing the brushstrokes that changed how we see. We'll meet his wheat stacks and poplars, his fog-drenched London Houses of Parliament, his intimate portraits of family and friends, and the great water lily pools that became a late-life cathedral of color. Curiosity. Monet painted the same view dozens of times to study light as if it were a subject that could be dissected and sung. Another surprise, the word that names an entire movement started as an insult. Stay with me. By the end, you'll hear light the way Monet heard it. Works on display in this opening pulse: Impression Sunrise, La Grenouillère, a haystack from his series, the Japanese bridge at Giverny, and the Rouen Cathedral facades, all glinting in their different dawns and dusks. Portrait: Claude Monet, youthful photograph. Claude Monet was born on November 14, 1840, in Paris, but raised in the port town of Le Havre. His family ran a grocery business. His childhood sketches began with caricatures and seaside scenes. As a teenager, he earned money drawing and selling caricatures in Le Havre's cafes. At 17, he met the artist Eugène Boudin, who introduced him to painting outdoors, en plein air, painting outside to capture the atmosphere and light directly. That encounter was pivotal. Monet later moved to Paris for art study, where academic training and salon culture pressed him toward finish and detail. But his spirit leaned the other way, toward looseness, color, and the sensation of a moment. Quick curiosity: Monet's early caricatures were so skillful, he supported himself briefly with them, a comic apprenticeship before the serious canvases began. The 1860s placed Monet at the crossroads of modern life and modern art. He painted with friends like Pierre-Auguste Renoir and Édouard Manet, testing new ways to record light and atmosphere. In 1869, Monet and Renoir painted side by side at La Grenouillère, a popular leisure spot on the Seine. The same day, different canvases, the same curiosity about reflections and splashy color. Japanese prints also reoriented his composition. Flattened planes and bold cropping taught Monet to think beyond Western perspective. And nature itself, the shifting weather of Normandy, the steam and ships of Argenteuil's riverbanks, became his laboratory. He learned to translate the fleeting into form, to make a moment repeatable yet alive. Images here show his La Grenouillère studies and river scenes where these lessons first flowered. Monet's career blossoms in series and experiments. Impression Sunrise, 1872, is the Thunderclap, a small harbor piece whose loose, visible brushwork and emphasis on light over line gave Impressionism its name. Monet then pursued series, groups of paintings of the same subject at different times and weather, to investigate light's variables. Haystacks, poplars, Rouen Cathedral, the Houses of Parliament, and finally, the Water Lilies. Each series is a slow experiment in color and perception. The haystacks, or wheat stacks, study harvest, atmosphere, and season. Monet isolates form and lets light paint the rest. The Rouen Cathedral canvases are a masterclass in chromatic variation. The solid stone dissolves into shimmering color under sunrise, fog, and dusk. In London, fog and smoke became a veil Monet peeled back with pigment. Late in life, his water lily panels grew vast, immersive, and almost abstract, their reflections and floating blossoms collapsing foreground, middle ground, and sky into a single shimmering plane. When I say impasto, that means areas where paint is applied thickly. Monet used it sparingly, preferring layers of broken color instead of thick sculpted paint. His brushwork is purposely visible, a vocabulary of dabs, strokes, and flecks that read as both structure and sensation. Images, you'll see Impression Sunrise, Haystacks Rouen Cathedral, Houses of Parliament, and several water lily canvases as examples of these signature moves. Certain years turned Monet's path. After the Franco-Prussian War, Monet lived in England for a time, where Thames fogs and Westminster silhouettes shifted his palette toward violet and pearl. Returning to France, he married Camille Dancieux and briefly found domestic stability, though financial insecurity and the pressures of the salon dogged him. A decisive move happened in 1883 when he settled in Giverny and began to cultivate the water garden that would define his last decades. There, he shaped nature itself, digging ponds, planting willows, and importing a Japanese bridge, turning horticulture into art practice. Another turning point, critical reception. Rejection and ridicule at exhibitions hardened his resolve. The birth of Impressionism as a term, initially derisive, ultimately consolidated a movement and audience. Curiosity. Monet often painted in series as if conducting scientific trials, same canvas size, same viewpoint, different hours, a patient, almost stubborn investigation of light. Monet's technique reads like a manual for capturing transience. He favored oil on canvas, often working alla prima, meaning he painted wet paint into wet paint in a single sitting to preserve spontaneity. He layered small strokes of unmixed color that the eye blends at a distance, a method sometimes called optical mixing. Brushes varied, flats for broad planes, filberts and brights for short, tactile marks. He used portable easels to paint en plein air, and later large studio space at Giverny to assemble series from panels made outdoors. Monet's palettes evolved. Early tones were earthier. Later years exploded into violets, pinks, silvery grays, and luminous greens. In old age, Monet developed cataracts, which affected his color perception and loosened his late work toward even bolder, broader handling. He later had surgery to remove cataracts, and that shift is visible in the changing hues of his final paintings. Quick curiosity. To study the same subject in different lights, Monet sometimes pinned several canvases on an easel and moved among them as the day changed, blocking in colors rapidly and returning later to refine them. Monet returned again and again to a handful of motifs: water, reflections, bridges, haystacks, poplars, cathedral facades, and ordinary urban boulevards. Water is both subject and mirror in his work. The surface of a pond becomes sky, plant life, and painter's mark all at once. Trees serve as vertical punctuation. The poplar series reads like a wind-driven chorus. Stacks of harvested grain, haystacks, stand like survivors in fields, shifting color with season and time. Cities reveal atmospheric mood more than architecture. His Boulevard des Capucines captures the city's bustle refracted through light and rain, while the Houses of Parliament reduce Gothic solidity to dissolving color. These motifs allowed Monet to turn repetition into discovery, treating a familiar object as an instrument for charting the invisible, the hour, the weather, the passing breath of a landscape. Monet's path to acclaim was not straight. Early critics dismissed Impressionist work as unfinished or careless. Impression's Sunrise famously inspired a satirical review that labeled the style Impressionism, an epithet the painters reclaimed. The salon system, the traditional arbiter of taste, often rejected his innovations, pushing Monet and his peers to mount independent exhibitions in the 1870s. Financial struggles, changing partnerships, and personal loss, including the death of his first wife Camille, shadowed his career. In the 20th century, critics argued about Monet's late work. Were the huge water lilies transcendent revelations or decorative lapses? Over time, museums and collectors vindicated Monet. Retrospectives reframed him as a major modernist who helped dismantle academic hierarchy. Curiosity. One controversy concerned size. Some viewers argued his large decorative panels were too monumental for painting and more like room decoration. Today, those same wall-sized works are prized for their immersive power. Monet's legacy radiates into 20th century modernism and beyond. By privileging perception over tidy representation, he opened pathways to abstraction. The Water Lilies anticipate later color field painters and abstract expressionists who explored scale, surface, and immersion. His serial approach influenced artists who probed time, repetition, and variation. Gardens and landscape painting would never look the same. Monet showed that a painter's engagement with a place could be sustained, obsessive, and generative. Museums today mount rooms of Monet panels, not as curiosities, but as experiential installations. Schools of painting worldwide teach his methods of broken color and plein air practice. Curiosity, Monet's Giverny garden became a pilgrimage site. Gardeners and painters still recreate his plantings to study how horticulture and composition interact. His work also encouraged scientists and psychologists to study color perception, because his canvases make optical blending irresistible. Sprinkled through Monet's life are small human surprises. He was an avid gardener who landscaped to suit compositions. He was also a man who struggled with money even after fame arrived. He painted both intimate family portraits and huge canvases intended for public display. Monet sometimes painted the same motif from different floors or vantage points to interrogate perspective as well as light. He maintained friendships and rivalries. An early camaraderie with Renoir, for example, produced paired canvases of the same scenes painted on the same afternoons. Another oddity, collectors once complained his canvases looked too unfinished up close. Monet intended them to be experienced at distance, where the optical mixing works its magic. Curiosity, Monet kept certain canvases unfinished for years, revisiting them between trips and seasons, as if a painting were a living thing he tended. Claude Monet died in 1926, yet his work continues to teach us how to look. He turned light into grammar and color into argument. To stand before a Monet is to be asked to wait, to allow your eye to mix strokes into atmosphere, and to accept that a single place can hold 1,000 different truths depending on the hour. Curiosity close. Many contemporary viewers feel Monet's late panels the way one feels music, not a story told, but a mood entered. His influence lives in modern painting, in garden design, in the way cities and museums stage light for visitors. As we leave the water lilies, the haystacks, the bridge, and the cathedral behind, remember the essential lesson Monet offered. Look again and notice the world changing every moment. Final images to carry that echo: a late water lily, the Japanese bridge at Giverny, a pool reflection, a Rouen facade dissolved in dawn, and a wheat stack glowing at sunset. Linger like notes held after the orchestra falls silent.